you all ready? How's it going, my kids? Kindergarten? Quiet coyote. Quiet coyote. I don't know what that really means, but this is the symbol for a coyote. In my days, that's what you did in an ACTC concert, but that's different. Shh. I mean, it's a different language. Shushies. Quiet. It's getting there. It's getting there. Something exciting has happened. I know what it is, right? I know what it is. It's because they're serving kale smoothies at Starbucks. Everybody's excited. I am not. I'm done with Starbucks now that they're serving kale. All right. Midterm, week from today. Review session tomorrow, 2 to 3. Review session Tuesday, 5 to 6. Locations were announced in an announcement by B-Courses last night, so look there. Most whining comes from the fact that some of the old exams, one didn't have a blank version. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the LaTeX file that's years old, so you just have the answer key, but Sam was kind enough to go through with an electronic eraser and put up a version that's got the answers blanked out so you can't see. And then apparently for one of the exams it says midterm 2, and for the blank exam I gave you midterm 1, and that's freaking people out, right? But it says midterm 1 on there quite clearly, so that was a mistake. I will try and find the blank midterm 2 to go with the answer key. But the answer key has the right questions and the right answers on it. So all the information you really need to study is there, just not as perfectly as I wish it were. So I'll fix that. Anything else? I put out an email with the questions you can ignore. Exam material goes from, basically starts with production, so the very end of lecture 9, and goes all the way through the end of today. Any other questions? Does the exam look different than the last one? The format's the same, the questions are going to be different. Any other questions? No? There, I knew it. I could feel it. Yeah. That is a really good question because I forgot. Yes, I will do that today. No, as I just said, right? Oh, sorry. Exam material ends at the end of today. So when I stop speaking today, that's where the midterm 2 material ends, right? So we're going to do a whole bunch of consumer producer surplus stuff today. Your head's going to be spinning at the end of today, and you're going to be terrified, which is sort of the point of this lecture. Okay, let's get going. At the end of lecture, I was just mean to some kid that came in and wants to make an announcement at the end of class. So somebody's going to come in and make some announcement about a fun thing you guys can do in your free time. That fun thing is paintball. I don't filter what people announce in my class because I feel like I shouldn't impose my own value judgments on information, but I have a really hard time with anything that involves a gun, frankly. So there's an announcement, but please do not interpret this as an endorsement of the activity. All right, I'm the real jerk now. All right, so what did we do last time? We defined producer surplus, which was great. It's the difference between supply and price over the range of production. Just like consumer surplus, it's measured in dollars, and in the long run, it's equal to profits. In the short run, it's the difference between producer surplus and profits is fixed costs, right? So we know that by now. Then we came up with a measure called welfare, which is the sum of consumer and producer surplus. So welfare isn't the thing we think about in terms of welfare programs in the U.S., but economists really use that consistently throughout the literature as the sum of consumer and producer surplus. It also is measured in dollars and allowed us to come up with this nice way of looking at the world where we're taking a perfectly competitive market, and we showed that if you produce less than the perfectly competitive market would produce when left alone, you don't maximize welfare. I asked you at home to go in and try and convince yourself that if you produce more than the perfectly competitive market would produce if left alone, you also don't maximize welfare. And I'll show you the answer to that now. That's a little bit of a tricky one, so I hope you struggled with it. Then we're going to keep on going forward and analyze a whole bunch of different settings where we're going to mess with the perfectly competitive market and show that deadweight loss arises when we mess with the perfectly competitive market. By the end of today, I'm going to be done with the perfectly competitive market, and we're going to get into the fun part where I'm going to let markets fail. Because markets fail all the time, and we're going to look at the consequences of market failure and try and figure out ways to get society back to the social optimum. For you in the back, there is one of the best seats in the house right here in the middle row. So come on down, take that seat. That's a good seat. Might not have a table on it, though. Okay, so that's where we are. So here's the answer to the question I asked you last time. Producing more than the perfectly competitive output also doesn't maximize welfare. Well, how do you show that? Well, you don't memorize anything in this class. A couple of definitions, yeah, but when you're trying to answer questions, don't memorize the picture and the pizza slices, memorize the steps, all right? So let's go through it. First step should always be to label your axes, all right, quantity and price. Then I'm going to draw a perfectly competitive market that looks something like, I don't know, this. That better be supply. And then I'm going to draw a nice demand curve that looks something like this. So if this market were left alone, this market would produce Q star units and charge P star dollars. Right, this is a typically competitive market. Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Where the lines cross, that gets me equilibrium quantity and price. Now what I'm trying to check out is what happens if for some reason we produce more than the perfectly competitive outcome. So we're somewhere to the right of Q star. So I'm going to make this a little bit drastic. I'm going to draw Q double star right here. Now I'm going to come back to your excellent question from last. I'm sorry, what's your name? Sophia. Had this excellent question last time, and that's the question you should ask every time you do one of these. What's the relevant quantity and what's the relevant price here, right? So if you're going to produce more than the perfectly competitive output, would firms do that voluntarily? The answer is no, because we know that when firms choose voluntarily what to produce, they produce where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, right? And that's the equilibrium. So something shoves here in this thought experiment, shoves quantity beyond what they would do by themselves. So there are two possible prices here, right? Either this is the right price or this is the right price. You could do it either way. Let me give you two potential ways that the government could nudge us into either an equilibrium where the equilibrium quantity is Q double star and the high price, or Q double star and the low price. So Q double star and the high price is the following: a scenario you have never encountered in your life. Are you filming me in the back there? Oh no, sorry. It looked like a camera, but it's just reflection in the sunglasses. It looked like I just taped an online lecture and it was the same camera light. I was like, whoa, spies. I'm not that important. But so high price versus low price. Let's look at the high price. All right, high price could arise in a setting. For example, you go to school. All right, you know what that's like. There's a textbook for your class, and there's a requirement that you buy the textbook. Right. In the absence of the requirement to purchase a textbook, not everybody would buy a textbook, right? Some people would, others wouldn't. The others would go to the library and use the textbook from the library, or just wouldn't use a textbook and use their natural smarts on the internet to get the same information, or download the free PDF from some hacker website, right? But there's a requirement to use a textbook, and in order to get book producers to be able to produce that number of textbooks, they need to be allowed to charge a certain amount, and the government says, well, you're allowed to charge that high price. So this is a scenario where the government says everybody must have a textbook, and textbook producers get to charge what they want. Let's assume away the sort of monopoly position that textbook producers or oligopoly position that textbook producers are in, but this is a scenario where there's a requirement for quantity and a price support for firms to actually charge the amount necessary to produce that price. Do we see that? Yes, right? Certain classes require certain textbooks, especially if the instructor has written said textbook, because instructors get kickbacks for those textbooks. Are textbooks cheap? What do you think the marginal cost of producing a copy of, Pindike and Rubenfeld is? I have no idea, but if it were more than $22, I would be really, really surprised, right? Even including the payments to the instructor, the author, and distribution, and so on. How much does Pindike and Rubenfeld cost, new edition? $200, right? So there's something afoot here that's worse than that, but you could easily see a scenario where government prescribes everybody to have something and lets firms charge what they want. So that's the high price scenario. The low price scenario is a different one. So my family comes from East Germany, where, prior to the wall coming down, prices and quantities weren't decided by markets, but they were decided by regulators ultimately, where you could argue that, firms are asked to produce Q double star, but they're only allowed to charge the low price, right? Would firms ever do this by themselves? No, right? Because they're losing money. The point here is if you get to charge this price, your marginal cost of production, the last unit is this number right here, so you're going to lose a whole bunch of money right here. So let's do the example, the latter one here, and then at home you can do the former. Let's do the one where the right price here is the low price, right? The government is forcing firms to produce a lot and charge a very low price. What does welfare look like here? So the right price is going to be, oops, shaky today, what's going on here? Okay. This is the low price. So let's think about what the right pizza slices are going to be. Let's do it. Consumer surplus, producer surplus, welfare, at Q star, and at Q double star. Okay. So let me think about this for a second. I'm definitely going to need this pizza slice. I'm going to need this pizza slice. I'm going to need this one. I'm going to need, this one. A, B, C, D, E, and F. If you want to chop it into more pieces, feel free to. In the end, you just have to pick the right ones. So let's start with our easy thing here, which if price is P star, the perfectly competitive price right here, and quantity is Q star, the perfectly competitive quantity right here, then consumer surplus is the area between demand, right, and price over the range of consumption is just going to be A. Producer surplus is going to be at P star, the area between price and supply over the range of production, so it's going to be B plus C. So welfare is A plus B plus C. And again, a reminder, please don't write A dash C for A plus B plus C. Write out the full summation. Okay, Q double star, things get a little bit trickier. So at Q double star, the easy thing to do is consumer surplus, right? Consumer surplus is the area between demand, is this line right here, and price. Now the new price is P double star because we're in a scenario where the government is forcing the lower price and forcing the higher quantity right here over the range of production. Production is now Q double star. So consumer surplus is this whole big triangle right here, A, B, D, and E. Now here comes the hard part. You ready for the hard part? All right. Did I ever say producer or consumer surplus have to be positive numbers? Never. I just said it's measured in dollars, right? You can have positive or negative producer surplus, much like you can have positive or negative profits. So let's think about what producer surplus is going to be, which is going to be the difference between price and supply over the range of production. I'm very proud of my new giant seafood Ruba here. I think it's great. So up until here, this point right here, price is higher than marginal cost or supply, right? So over this range of production right here, you get more dollars than it takes per unit than it takes to produce that unit. So this pizza slice C right here is going to be traditional positive producer surplus. What if we go beyond that though? Now, price, the red line, is lower than the marginal cost of production, which is captured by supply. So the definition of producer surplus was the difference between price and supply over the range of production. So here that difference is positive profit slash producer surplus, but from here on, it's actually negative. Is this a magic Harry Potter-like trick, right? No, it's not, right? Because over this range of production, given price is lower than the marginal cost of production, you're losing money here, right? So it's negative producer surplus, and if we're in the long run here, this is negative profit. So total producer surplus at P double star and Q double star is going to be C minus D minus E minus F, right? And because just by looking at the size here of D, E, and F relative to C, overall producer surplus is likely going to be negative in this setting. This firm is going to lose a ton of money. So producer surplus in this particular scenario is going to be C minus D minus E minus F. So what's total welfare? It's A plus D plus E plus C minus D minus E minus F. So D and E cancel out. So you have A plus B plus C minus F. So before, total welfare was A, B, C. Now total welfare is A, B, C minus F. So you lost F in terms of total welfare. So deadweight loss here, let's pick a dark color here to show this. F is deadweight loss. So there's deadweight loss, meaning you're worse off producing more than the perfectly competitive output. You're worse off producing less than the perfectly competitive output. So what automatically maximizes welfare is leaving firms alone in perfectly competitive markets. And these two pictures where you produce to the left or to the right and looking at the welfare overall from participants in this market, relative to just letting them do what you want, is the underlying finding that has led to pundits across the board saying that government intervention in markets is bad. What they should be saying is government interventions in perfectly competitive markets is bad. That's a correct statement. But government intervention in markets across the board is not a correct statement, as we'll see shortly. If you have monopolies, oligopolies, public goods, externalities, asymmetric information, moral hazard, all kinds of market failures, having government go in and actually do something to markets, we will see will actually improve welfare of society. All right? So I hope this is clear. The other thing from a more sort of IES 106, how am I going to survive the next 4 weeks of this terrifying class? Sleep, take your vitamins, and good exercise, all right, and a good diet. Stay away from kale. But there's an inclination right here of looking at these problems, drawing the pictures, and immediately saying, oh, dead weight loss has to be a triangle. I know it's F. Don't do that, right? Resist the temptation to immediately jump to pretending to know what dead weight loss is going to be. I will come up with questions where you can't see it, and I will give you an example in a second that shows that it's just really hard to spot that unless you actually go through the steps and actually look at for P star, Q star, P double star, Q double star. You go through actually figuring out what consumer and producer surplus and welfare are in each setting and comparing the two, right? So go through the steps. Don't guess. You will get it wrong 100% of the time. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about something that's actually pretty interesting here and furthering the cause of my yoga theorem right here. I want to talk a little bit about demand elasticity and taxes, right? So we're going to stick to these specific taxes that we've liked. And what I want to show you is what happens to the prices that people pay in different states of the world. And by different states of the world, I simply mean states of the world where we have a demand elasticity and potentially different elasticities of supply, and we show what happens to changes in the prices experienced by consumers. Okay. Actually, this is already mislabeled. You can do it the other way around too, but I want to draw the supply one. All right, Sam just sent me a text message from the back of the classroom that he's fixed all of the exam problems in B courses, so we're okay. All right, Sam. All right, thanks. I know Ananya Roy uses Twitter in the classroom. I'm still in a text message kind of world, but, you know, we can't all be Ananya. Big fan, big fan. All right. So here we go. What I want you to think about now is I want you to think about two markets, and this slide is all messed up. This is what happens when you do copy and paste. I want you to think of a market that has really elastic supply and one market that has inelastic supply. But they both have the same demand curve, okay? And I want to see what happens in these markets if you charge a certain tax. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw two markets that have the exact same demand curve, but different supply curves. Then I'm going to charge a specific tax, and I'm going to see what happens to the prices that consumers face versus the money that producers actually get to take home. So I'm going to start with a demand curve that starts one square from the top and goes right down here like that. So identical demand curve. And then I want to draw a supply curve that starts 2 squares from the bottom and then 3 squares in from the right, processed as 4 squares on top right here. I hope these squares print for you. Okay, so this is my supply curve. This is a relatively flat supply curve, right? So if prices change a little bit, quantity supply adjusts a lot. So this is very elastic supply. Now I'm going to draw a different market, a market where that crosses through the same point. So I'm going to go 3 in from the right, 4 up. But then this supply curve is really, really steep, okay? Looks something like this. So here's supply, here's demand, here's demand. So just to convince ourselves that these two curves are crossing at the same quantity and price, I can lay a straight line through. I can lay a straight line through the equilibrium price here in both pictures. This is P star, and Q star is also the same thing. Okay, so I do nothing fancy here. Same equilibrium price and quantity in both markets. The only difference is this one here has a really elastic supply curve. Think of big dot theorem. This green line is supposed to go right through this point, and this one has a steeper supply curve, much less elastic supply curve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge a specific tax of the same amount in both markets. Right? It's going to be a big, big specific tax. It's going to be a 3 square specific tax. Okay, so the way to draw it is just go 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3 up, and draw the new supply curve. Okay, where the difference here between these two supply curves is simply a specific tax tau, a 3 square tax. In case you're wondering what I mean by squares, is I obviously mean the grids on these graphs. So I'm going to do the same thing in the other graph right here. I'm going to charge a specific tax of also 3 squares. Right? So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 right here. And I'm going to draw it right through here. So there's no cheating here. This right here has the same 3 square tax as the picture on the left-hand side. But Max, why do these look so much further apart than these? Curves that are steeper, right, appear to be closer together even though they have the same vertical distance in these two. And you saw this, I didn't cheat, I actually drew this to scale with great care. Now, what happens here? Well, let's look at what happens to price in the left market versus to the price that consumers pay in the right market. Right? So in the left market, the new equilibrium price is this thing right here. Right? And the new equilibrium quantity is QT. So last time we called this here the price that consumers pay. And in the right market, this is QT, and this is the price that consumers pay. Wow! What happened, Max? I started at the same equilibrium price and quantity. I charged the same tax in both markets with the same demand curve, right? These are two consumers with the same yoga ability. The only thing that's different here is supply is different. I've got a really flexible producer here with a flat marginal cost curve, and I've got a really inflexible producer here with a really steep marginal cost/supply curve, right? So let's look at this for one more second here. So how many dollars does the producer get to take home